Disruptive Dialogue with Thomas Cotton fosters conversations from incredible people and organizations where we hope to bring different perspectives that will help innovate change in our communities, cities, and nation. Hello, and welcome to another edition of the Disruptive Dialogue. My name is Thomas Cotton. Today we have with us Pastor Brian McCroy Sr. Pastor, leader, visionary are a few words to describe Brian. He is the founding pastor of Solomon Temple Christian Ministries in Jonesboro, Georgia, the husband of 25 years to his lovely wife, Krista McCrory, and the father of 5 children. Pastor McCrory has worked diligently and in a multitude of ways in his calling to bring lost souls to the Lord. Through many of his life trials and challenges, he has found his way to exercising the gifts that God has planned for him and planted in him for kingdom use. Through Solomon Temple's Christian ministry, Pastor McCrory desires to unchurch the mindset of believers from the church tradition to Bible truth.
And it wasn't easy in LA with 3 children, making 50 grand a year. It's not easy.
Not easy.
Dating a woman who's in IT, driving a company car with no children. Next question.
You know, I'm going to be honest with you. Like, if you think about the rhetoric that we hear about relationships today, that relationship doesn't work. That's not something that people are saying, this is what I want. But now you have the history of saying, this is where we started, but 25 years later, this is where we're at, you know, and this is what we've gone through. This is what we've seen in one another and building off of that. So I'm not going to get too far ahead of myself, but that's a story in itself right there, that how many people are missing the blessing that they have right in front of them because it's single, struggling with 3 kids, and I'm executive, my own car, and, you know, or a company car, and I don't know if executive, but company car and working. So, you know, there's these things that we kind of miss blessings. We create brokenness for ourselves because we have all these other rules in our life. And instead of realizing this could be the blessing that's supposed to be right here to help me with my brokenness.
Yeah, because you don't think you're qualified, you know, and that negative self-talk, you know, man, you don't have any business over here. You know, I didn't even want to come over to the club, right? Like, in order to go to the club that night, I had to call another one of my brothers to come over, sit with my children so that I can go see my younger, I'll call my older brother to come sit with my children so I could go hang out with my younger brother. And that's when I met my wife. But one thing that I said to her when we started courting, when I realized that she was into me, I took her out to lunch one day and I said, hey, listen, I know what I look like today. You know, I mean, you like me because I'm good looking and I got good conversation, but I know you see my situation, you know, and I wanted you to know that it won't always be like this. I'm going somewhere. And if you want to come along, let me paint a picture for you. And that was a conversation we had at a Jack in the Box in LA, in Inglewood.
All right. So I just got to say, my boy got game. I'm just kidding.
Hey, I was doing it, man. I was doing it. Yeah.
Hey, but you know, when you know, right? And in this point, you understand what walking by faith looks like. You're making moves, you understand. And I can agree to that. When I was 28, 29, I had the clothes on my back and a few $100 in my pocket, $300. But you can't tell me nothing. I know where I'm going, right? And so it's one of those things you just, when you find the right one and they know, it really helps make you feel secure. So fast forward, you're married now. How long you been married? Talk about some of the, like you said, brokenness and disruptions haven't left. And so let's get to like some of the disruptions there and how you overcame those disruptions. And then I'm going to get to a point where I want you to encourage the audience to see that you're human just like everybody else, but you love the Lord. You're a great husband. You're a dad. And I've been broken, but here's some steps to get over that. So let's go to your relationship first.
Sure. So one of the things that I had to take note of was living through unresolved trauma. So I'm painting a picture for my wife but I'm still traumatized, because I came up in a single parent household. So I'm trying to be a father that I never had. Right. So I don't have a blueprint. My mom didn't read. My mom wasn't married. There was no man living in the house when I grew up. So everything I did, I was learning from people, from grown men that I had interacted with over the course of my life. Yeah. So I never had that real example. And so I'm trying to figure things out and say what I believe is the right thing to say, and walk in what I believe the right walk is. Because I'm not studying my Bible and all of that kind of stuff. I'm just hanging on to the faith that I had. With my wife, now we're together. I've got 3 children. She's got no children. And then we decide we want to move to Sacramento from Los Angeles. And within a month of moving, I find my son is diagnosed with Duchenne's muscular dystrophy. Wow. Now, we thought he was just kind of a late bloomer. He didn't walk on time. He kind of trot. He dragged his feet, that kind of stuff. His muscles were overdeveloped. I used to be proud. I'm like, look at my son's muscles, having no idea that this was a part of the condition, overdeveloped muscles as a toddler.
And this is your youngest son at the time, right? I mean, youngest child at the time.
My only son, and he's my baby at the time.
Right. At the time, right.
Yeah, and he was diagnosed at 5 years old with Duchenne's muscular dystrophy. And so I find out after moving to Sacramento and launching this next level career, making more money than I had ever made, looking to buy a house and all of that, I find out my son has been diagnosed with this disease, and they're giving him to the age of like 16 years old.
Wow.
And they're telling me that at some point, by the time he's 7 or 8 years old, he's going to be in a wheelchair and he's going to lose his mobility. Mm. So I'm hearing this from the doctor, and then I've got to process this. And my wife hears it at the same time that I hear it. So now she has committed to something that she didn't see coming, because we're married. Now this is
Today's episode is brought to you by Redemption and Advancement Alliance, whose mission is to provide innovative support to people to disrupt the cycles of incarceration and poverty. Go to www.redeem-advance.org to find out more information, or make your $1,000, $100, $10, or even $1 donation to help support people who want to stay alive and free.
Our thing, our issue. And not that, she didn't kick at it or, buck at it or anything like that. But, I was thinking that stuff, right? Like, how are we going to do this? Right. How can I expect this woman to still kick it with me, knowing that all this is coming? So that was traumatic, man. But the only thing that I could do was control what I could control. And again, that took me back to the desperation of God's requirement, his divine intervention in my life, because my mind was going crazy. So the only thing that could stabilize my mind was focusing on my job, focusing on my son, and figuring out what the care was going to be like. Because at the time, he wasn't dealing with any of the symptoms.
Yeah.
He was still walking, still being a little boy and all that kind of stuff. So I just saw this stuff coming. But for me, in my head, honestly, bro, I never believed that there would be a day that my son would be in a wheelchair, because God gave me that first job in Kentucky.
Right.
So for me, every obstacle took me back to getting that job when the man told me no and ended up telling me yes. Right. And so God had done enough things for me at the time where, as heartbreaking as it was, man, I knew I still had to keep going. I had to keep driving.
Yeah. That's tough right there. So what brought you to Atlanta? What are some of the challenges that you had to face? And then I just want you to share a level of hope with people.
So in Sacramento, or even in Southern California, I had become a part of a church. We moved to Sacramento, became a part of a church, got really involved in ministry in Sacramento. My finances were at an all-time high. My wife and I were living, we had a really, really good, solid village. I was learning how to minister the word. I was learning how to teach Bible study. I was doing all that. My career was on a great trajectory. My wife, we had our first child, and she was able to not work, because I told her, you work if you want to work, but you don't have to work. My wife liked working, but when it came to having children, she didn't want to work while having children. So the blessing for me is that we were able to do that financially. I was able to keep my family covered. And we decided one day that Sacramento just wasn't enough for us. Really, it was nobody wanted to come visit us in Sacramento because Sacramento was too boring. So I'm just telling you, that's what it was, man.
Well, you got to understand, I lived in Sacramento before I moved to Atlanta also. So
Okay.
we have a connection there.
Cowbells and Arco Arena. That was it. Cowbells and Arco Arena. That's what you think about Sacramento. And so we started doing our research, and we started trying to look for a place that was going to be conducive for both of us. And Atlanta was the choice. It was kind of centralized. My wife is from Louisiana. I grew up in Illinois. I got family in California, family in Philly, family in Mississippi, and her family was between Louisiana and Texas for the most part. So we felt like Atlanta was a nice centralized location where everybody could get to us. And that was the reason, that was the decision. And we prayed about it, and we felt compelled, we felt led to make that transition to Atlanta. And that was in around 2004. So that's how we got here. Got here in 2004, bought a house. What's interesting is I had made so much money in 2004. I'd made more money than I'd ever made by June. So when we decided to move to Sacramento, I was looking to resign from my job so that I wouldn't get hit so hard with taxes, and then I could write off the move,
right,
and have benefits. And I said, I'll find a job in January of 2005. That's where my faith was. Wow. I'll have a job in January. I'll go looking in January of 2005. By January, I'll be working, and we'll be off to the races. And that was the idea coming to Georgia.
Wow. We got to sit back, and we never talked about this before, and there's so many similarities there. And, there's things that overlap. I lived in Sacramento the same time you lived in Sacramento. It's crazy.
Yeah.
So with that being said, like, you have the challenges, let's talk a little bit about your son, and, let's talk about the growth in Atlanta, and then like summarize that really quickly. Talk about your son a little bit. I also want you to talk before we leave about the blessings that you're receiving from today, like the things that he created and everything else. And so let's go.
So moving to Georgia, I was just on a mission, man. I'm on a mission to impact the world. My mantra is not to be famous, but to be impactful. And with all of the experiences I had, in the non-for-profit world in Southern California, what I did in Sacramento, and then the move to Georgia, and the way that God blessed me with a nice opportunity when I got to Georgia, a beautiful home, and getting connected in ministry, I was just running. And my son, his body started to change, started to shift. He started having more challenges. He ended up going into the wheelchair, and his mobility became reduced. In 2010, he was hospitalized for like 47 days. We thought we were going to lose him. And during that time, man, I hit a wall. I hit a real wall, because I couldn't understand how God would bless me with one son and 4 daughters, and then my son would have a condition that's supposed to take his life. And so I started seeing that happening when we got to Georgia. And in 2010, when he was hospitalized, I hit a wall. I hit an emotional wall. I hit a spiritual wall. I got angry. I was really angry. I'm preaching the gospel, but my faith was interrupted because I couldn't understand it. To the point to where I didn't want to preach. I didn't want to teach. I went to the hospital, and I stayed in the hospital with my son. He was there 47 days. I was there 46 out of the 47 days. I came home twice in 47 days. I probably ate 20 of those days.
Wow.
Like I lost a ton of weight. People thought I was sick, you know. So that was a real struggle for me. And I began to pray my way through, fight my way back. My friends, my church, my family, they were supporting me. But it wasn't easy, man. It wasn't easy. And so we made it through that. My son got sick again in 2012. And in 2012, we were about 6 hours where they had already talked about bringing in the transition team. They started telling me, you need to have a conversation with your family. They gave my son some medication and said, if this medication doesn't take in the next 6 hours, we need to know what your process is, you know. And I'll never forget that the respiratory doctor came into the room, the waiting room, and asked me if I wanted to pray. And I said, I don't know your prayer life. And I wouldn't pray with her. That is something that I really, really regret, because somebody asked me to pray and I declined. I prayed myself with my family, but I wouldn't let her pray. Now that's deep. That's deep. So we worked through that, survived that. And I asked my son, I said, man, are you trying to leave me in that hospital stay? He said, no, I'm not going anywhere. He had been intubated. What ended up happening is the medication did take, the infection did begin to dissipate. So there was a praise report there and we celebrated, man, we celebrated, but I was still angry.
Yeah.
Okay. We made it through that. And my son, I asked him, I said, man, are you trying to leave me? He goes, no, I'm not trying to go anywhere. So from that moment, from 2012 to the year he passed, my son didn't even catch a cold.
Wow.
And so what he did was he was determined to do something with his life. He wanted to have impact. He launched a business. He rewired, and I did the work physically, but he told me how. He did all the research, he studied, rewired his entire room to make everything voice activated. He can control everything from a little pad about this, smaller than this, like a 2-inch by 2-inch pad that he held in his hand in his lap, because he couldn't, my son, you know, he got to the point to where he couldn't raise his arms, you know, he couldn't scratch his own nose, he couldn't adjust in his chair. You know, muscular dystrophy it's a horrific disease, right? Mm-hmm. And so he couldn't really move anything, but he still had use. He got to the point where he only had use of his left thumb on this pad, and he was right-handed. He learned how to draw. He was already drawing and stuff, but he learned how to draw on a pad, on a screen, like freehand drawing, all that. He launched a marketing business. He launched a clothing line, all of that, BJ's Designs. Matter of fact, I keep his stuff, Tridot. This is his stuff right here. If you see that, it says here on the front, don't give up, don't stop, keep going. Yes. This was his mantra in life. And today, I keep that going. Mm-hmm. Right? This is his stuff. So I keep that going in his honor. And he became my light. He became my purpose, man. You know, my family, I supported my family, but the truth, the purpose, the drive for purpose for me was to be everything that he needed me to be while he was on this earth. I wanted to make sure that he got the best that he could get while he was still here. And my family made room for me to be able to do that. So that's really awesome when it comes to my son's life.
A lot of dark nights, a lot of dark days, a lot of dark moments here, you know, but you still have this is my purpose. This is my moment. This is who I'm with right here. So in closing, I want you to share what got you through those nights. I know faith, we talked about that. We talked about prayer, but what can you use that other people can use tangibly to get them through some of the broken times, the darkest hours, to get to the point of hope? And even like your son, as you mentioned, passed not a few years ago,
2020.
And there are things now that you had to overcome in the last 3 years that keep you moving forward and encouraged in moving things and still supporting other people in their brokenness. So share some of that.
So brokenness, I call it, you know, for me, emotional brokenness, it can be it can have a really challenging impact on a person's life. and healing from that is a really complex process, man. I mean, there's steps that you can take to begin your healing process, and for me, it was holding on to my faith. You know, it was acknowledging my emotional state and accepting it for what it was. But to me, the first step to healing is to acknowledge and accept how you feel. Recognize that you do feel this. It's don't deny your feeling. Don't deny your emotional state, because you won't know how to fix it if you deny that it even exists. Too many people are out here pretending like they're not hurting.
Yeah.
You know, too many, like for me, my pride is something, man. You know, I had to pour into people, and I needed someone to pour into me. I thank God for my family. I thank God for my children. Thank God for my wife, who were there for me. But there were moments that you know, as much as they were pouring, I wasn't receiving. There was something I had to do within myself. And that's me acknowledge what I'm going through, acknowledge my feelings, so that I can begin the healing process. And that means confronting difficult emotions like heartbreak, like sadness, like anger, frustration, disappointment, fear. You know, giving yourself permission to not to feel that and not judge yourself. Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
Mm-hmm. It does.
So to me, I think that one of the things for me was taking advantage of the support group that I had around me, you know, leaning on them. What I love about seeding into people's lives is sometimes you have to go to those that you have seeded into and pull some of that, right? That's what I've learned. My faith, number one, knowing that because I came out of homelessness, because I came out of sickness, because I came out of brokenness once before, I knew that God could do it again.
Yeah.
Understanding what the word did. So for me, you know, aside from my understanding of the word of God, making sure that I had a village around me, making sure that I was okay with feeling what I was feeling, but recognizing that as down as I was, I couldn't stay there.
Yes.
Right? I couldn't stay there. So learning how to cope. You know, some of us have to learn new coping skills. You have to practice self-care. You know, you got to take care of yourself, because when I lost all that weight, it wasn't until a coworker came to visit my son in the hospital. Two things happened. A coworker came and visited and said, "When was the last time you ate?" Because at the time that my coworkers came to visit, I had already lost like 25 pounds. I'm not that big already.
Right.
You know, so 25 pounds, you're going to know with me. And so keep continuing to eat, keep yourself healthy, taking care of your body, remembering that you have to survive this. The doctor in the hospital said, "You need to take care of yourself, Dad." They would always call me Dad, you know, because you'll mess around and be in the bed next to your son. How are you going to help him if you're dying off because of your brokenness? You
Mm-hmm.
know, so I realized I wasn't any good to people broken. But I also recognize that living with brokenness does not equate to dying. Learning how to live with it and move forward and get beyond it and take care of yourself and recognize that brighter days are coming if you keep yourself available for what's coming.
That's good.
You got to be available for it.
Keep yourself available to what's coming. You
Yeah.
know, for this episode, I think this was an amazing finish and really some good nuggets that we can take away on how to address brokenness within our life. Because just because we're broken doesn't mean we're damaged beyond repair.
Right.
Doesn't mean that we can't, you know, overcome the challenges that are in front of us, but we have to show up. We have to continue to believe that there's a greater purpose in what we're doing. And there are things that are going to hurt us. There are things that are beyond our control that put us in a certain situation. But we have to know by faith we can walk through this. And you know, one of my favorite scriptures, and this is not a, you know, me proselytizing people, but I like to share my faith a lot. One of my favorite scriptures is Psalm 23. You know, when we talk about, you know, that, yeah, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I'll fear no evil. It's not like you're not going to be in the valley of the shadow of death. You can be there, but there's this walk that you're still doing. There's this walking it out, believing that there's a purpose behind everything you're doing. So with that being said, I want to say thank you for joining us today. You have been an inspiration, and I'm sure this won't be the last time I ask you to call back and talk about a topic, because there's so many different things that we get a chance to talk about on a regular basis. If you want to find us on a regular basis, Brother of Legacy, you'll find that on YouTube and Facebook, the Brothers of Legacy, the brothers. And so we get together and we have conversations mostly every Thursday. But again, this has been great. It's been deep. It's been rich. And I hope that people get a chance to walk away with it. So again, thank you for joining us for another episode of the Disruptive Dialogue. We look forward to seeing you again next week. Make sure you like and share this video. And if there's something that you want to comment on, please comment and let us know that you are listening, that there's something that stood out to you. And we just thankful for your support.